1994 is often remembered as one of the oddest movie years of all time. It gave us landmark films, massive cultural moments, and some of the most quoted movies in history.
I don't blame you for doubting my abilities. You'd be a fool not to. Been a drunk for the last 20 years.
But while those titles dominated the stage, another group of films quietly fell between the seats. Some were critically rejected, some were disappointing, some were simply released at the wrong time. And yet, many of these movies didn't vanish. They built loyal followings and became familiar fixtures of 90s pop culture. These were the 1994 movies that struggled when they first arrived, but eventually found second lives. Milk Money, a movie that became controversial the second it was released.
Are you a prostitute? What?
Will you take your clothes off for $103.62?
The premise alone made critics uncomfortable, and reviews were overwhelmingly negative. The film also failed to perform well at the box office, and quickly disappeared from theaters. But time gave it a different context. Viewers who discovered it later often focused less on the shock value and more on the coming-of-age tone and the performances. It never became widely praised.
Well, there's only one way to find out.
But it became frequently discussed and debated, which kept it alive long after its theater run ended.
Are you, what I think you are?
Well, I'm not the public health nurse.
Would you, like some company?
Yes, I would.
Hi.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, boss.
Hi.
Did you hear that?
2 is always better than 1.
This is the legend of the Double Dragon.
One of the earliest video game adaptations of the 90s. Expectations were high, but the final product confused both fans of the game and general audiences.
Shuko, Lash, we found it.
Critics were harsh, and ticket sales were weak. What kept it from disappearing entirely was timing, and the rise of home video and cable allowed a generation of kids to discover it outside theaters.
You're a tough guy, huh, Jimmy? You're not worth saving. We came for this.
Over time, it became part of the largest history of video game movies. Not as a success, but as an early example, people remember discussing how the genre evolved. Clifford is one of the strangest comedies of the decade. Martin Short playing an uncontrollable 10-year-old child confused almost everyone when the movie came out.
My God, is there no end to your madness? You're lying. No. You're lying to your own father's face. I have a good mind to leave you right here, you little animal.
Reviews were brutal, and the film underperformed financially. Ultimately, it gained an unexpected reputation. People that rewatch it begin to appreciate how deliberately uncomfortable and extreme the performance actually was.
You're doing it right now. Can you just act like a human boy for 1 minute here? Look at me like a person. You can't do it for more than a few seconds. Look at me like a human boy. Don't mess around with me.
It didn't become a mainstream favorite, but it became a cult curiosity, often cited as one of the most bizarre studio comedies ever released.
I just want to say that.
Bad Girls arrived during a period when westerns were struggling. Despite its cast and ambition, it was dismissed by critics and failed to attract large audiences.
Show me later.
The box office numbers were disappointing, and the movie faded quickly. In years passing, it was watched again as an unusual entry in the genre. Its attempt to tell a Western from a different perspective gave it lasting relevance, even if it never became a hit. It's now remembered more as a bold experiment than a simple failure. Trapped in Paradise was a holiday comedy that simply didn't find an audience. Released with little fanfare, it received mixed reviews and performed poorly in theaters.
God, are you okay?
Well, we're not dead, if that's what you mean.
But repeated television airings changed its reputation. The setting, the cast chemistry, and the Christmas backdrop slowly turned into a seasonal favorite for viewers. It never became a classic.
$275,000.
But it became a reoccurring December rewatch for people who stumbled across it at the right time.
Excuse me. The sign says take a pen, not take all the pens.
Blank Check is one of those movies that kids loved and critics disliked. Reviews were harsh, and the film underperformed relative to expectations.
Are you okay?
Yet, its afterlife was strong. People who saw it on VHS remember it vividly. The fantasy of sudden wealth, the oversized mansion, and the wild spending spree made it a staple of 90s nostalgic movies. It may not have impressed critics, but it absolutely imprinted on its audience. Jimmy Hollywood is one of those movies that struggled for identity. Part satire, part drama, part social commentary.
The phone could ring any moment. That could be the call. That my phone? No.
It confused reviewers and failed to attract large crowds. Later, it gained recognition for what it was trying to say about fame, media, and public obsession. It's now remembered as a transitional film and as an early example of Hollywood critiquing itself on screen.
These are not scrambled eggs. Not ice cream.
Let's not forget about Airheads. When it was released, critics were unimpressed.
You getting all this, Wilson?
Establish contact, make sure it's not a false alarm. I know the procedure.
And the box office was disappointed. The premise felt silly, the tone was uneven, and it arrived during a crowded summer season. But this is one of the clearest examples of a movie being rescued by home video. Cable reruns and late-night airings turned into a cult staple.
That's it? You're gonna scream rock and roll. You're gonna go to jail for that.
There's a saying, Milo. If it's too loud, you're too old.
The cast, the music industry satire, and the absurd hostage setup gave it longevity it never achieved in theaters.
You guys are like the Lone Rangers, right?
Yeah.
We saw you guys at the Wheel Well last month. You suck.
Hey, come down here and say that, you punk.
Damn straight, you can kiss my ass.
Hey, why don't you guys make all the chicks get naked?
These were the 1994 movies that struggled commercially or critically, but still managed to carve out a place in pop culture. They weren't celebrated when they came out, but being remembered often matters more than being successful. They weren't the films that defined the year. They were the films that survived it, and sometimes survival is the most interesting story of all.
The general air dry.
Thanks for using Wigwam.